This episode addressing the safety of LGBTQI plus people in Belgium and Brussels was recorded before the gruesome murder of David Philippe, a murder that appears to have been motivated by the hatred of LGBTQI plus people. This attack sadly reminds us that even the perceived feeling of freedom and safety shouldn't be taken for granted. At KET, we are committed to keep our shoulders high and keep fighting to make sure that all our voices are heard until they are fully accepted. We offer our condolences to David's family and we dedicate this episode to him.
Drama Drag Race.
Welcome to this new episode of KET Talks, the podcast of KET Magazine. I am Philippe and I am your host. And today we will talk about how queer-friendly it is here in Brussels and Belgium. How are the LGBTQI plus rights here? What is our perception? And can we compare it to other places in Europe? And to talk about this, I have the luck to be surrounded by the fabulous three persons here. And the first one is there, Vincent, our LGBTQI specialist from France. Welcome.
Well, thank you to be here again, Philippe.
Well, welcome to you. Then, next to Vincent sits our Croatian princess and music lover, Vjeran.
Hello guys, how are you?
I'm fine.
Yay.
Thank you. Good. And then we have our Hungarian friend Bogat. Happy to have you also around the table.
Hello everyone, I'm very happy as well to be here with you guys again.
Before talking about the topic, it's funny how, I don't know why, but we are all in those reddish, pinkish colors. Is it like a coincidence? Probably, yeah. But it's nice.
Yeah, it's a weird coincidence.
Yeah. Even the painting behind you is red.
It's true. If you want to see it, check it on YouTube, of course.
Wow.
So, as said, the topic of the day is the LGBTQI rights in Brussels and Belgium. How does Belgium compare to other countries? And as we have a French, a Hungarian, a Croatian, and a Belgian around the table, we'll also talk about personal perception on these human rights. So, Vincent, I am sure you did some research on today's topic. So, how does Belgium compare to other countries from an LGBTQI plus perspective?
Well, Philippe, to answer that question, we can look at what is called the ILGA Europe Rainbow Index. So it's an index that ranks all the 49 countries of Europe regarding their laws and their policies towards queer people. For those who don't know, ILGA Europe is the European branch of the International Association for LGBTQI plus people. So this index that they created is based on all the laws and policies that a country can adopt and implement in order to guarantee protection and non-discrimination of all LGBTQI plus people. For example, at work, regarding family laws, the protection against hate crime and hate speech, legal gender recognition for trans people, protection of body integrity for intersex people, the capacity to be visible in the public space, and asylum rights for queer people. So this index, it lists all the types of laws and policies that are requested by LGBTQI plus associations worldwide. What IGLA does is that they look at how many of these laws and policies are adopted and implemented in each country in Europe. So if you do it all, you have 100% score. And if you do nothing, you have 0%. So when we look at that ranking, we find on the first place a small island of the Mediterranean, which is Malta, that ranks with first with 89% of compliance. And at the second place, we found Belgium and Luxembourg, which are ranked at 73%. This is good, and this shows that there is still some work to do because it's only three-fourths of what should be done.
Mm-hmm.
But if we compare to other countries, we have France at 56%, Germany at 51%, Croatia for Vjeran here at 46%, Hungary at 33%, which is still higher than Italy, for example, which is only at 23%.
Oh, wow.
And
Shame.
as we can expect, at the bottom we find Russia with 10%, Turkey at only 4%, and Azerbaijan at 2%.
So Belgium is second, so can I conclude that it's all fine here?
Well, this index, as you understood, only compares the laws and policies. It's not really talking about how it's implemented. So what is the feeling on the ground? For that, we can look at a survey, European survey, what was conducted by the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights, which is an agency of the European Union. It interviewed or it surveyed 140,000 LGBTQI plus people in 2019, and the survey, the results were published in 2020.
140,000.
Yeah,
Wow, that's
in
cool.
all 28 countries of the EU at that time, plus a few other acceding members. So when you look at that, we have how people on the ground in each country feel towards different aspects. Some are good for Belgium because 56% of the respondents living in Belgium think that the government combats effectively prejudice and intolerance. Also, 60% of Belgium respondents say that they are fairly or very open about being LGBTQI plus people, which is good. It ranks Belgium fourth, high above the average. But on other aspects, we see that the situation is not that positive. We have about 1/3 of the same-sex partners that never or rarely avoid holding hands in public for fear of being assaulted, threatened, or harassed.
I had it
which
last
is-
week here.
Yeah.
Which is
Wow.
not that good. Also, 1/3, a bit more of 1/3 of LGBTQI plus people that often or always avoid certain places for fear, again, of being assaulted, threatened, or harassed. And 42% of the people surveyed experience harassment due to being LGBTQI plus in the previous year, which is almost on the top of this ranking, a little bit above average. 14% experience physical or sexual attack in the last 5 years. And out of this 14%, only 1/5 reported it to the police. And 1/5 of them also didn't report it to the police because they were afraid of homophobic or transphobic reaction when
From the
reporting to the police. Altogether, 16% only of the respondents reported the most recent incident of discrimination, which is quite low, but still above average. And to conclude on that, I wanted to add that at the federal level here in Belgium, we have two different structures that deals with homophobia, transphobia, and discrimination against intersex people. You have UNIA, the Interfederal Center for Equal Opportunities, that deals with homophobia or discrimination based on sexual orientation, and the Institute for the Equality of Men and Women, that deals with discrimination of intersex people and transphobia and all discrimination related to gender identity and gender expression.
So here it's two different institutions that are working on these topics.
Yes, depending if it's sexual orientation or
Gender.
and intersex discrimination. So in case you want to report some abuse, you have to contact
out.
one of these two structures that receive some reports of harassment or abuse for being LGBTQI+.
Okay. And then you go to the website of UNIA, it's unia.be.
Yes, and we will put all the links on the website of KET magazine.
Okay. Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Then
Very
I'm going
nice.
to Bogat now because you are from Hungary. We heard
Mhm.
in the list that from the people around this table, Hungary is doing not fine. So do you also feel it there?
Well, for sure. I mean, there's a reason why I actually moved to Belgium. But it's very funny when I think about it. When I was there, I didn't really question the status quo. I accepted that situation for LGBTQI plus people were not as great, and we had to hide ourselves at work, at school, in public places. And when I moved to Belgium, it hit me. It was really like a shock that I can actually be very free and I can be myself. So when I look back, of course, I'm very sad, and it's saddening to see that even last year the got new regulations towards transgender people. For example, they cannot change their assigned gender identity on their ID card, passport, and so on. And then they cannot even change their name. So it's very tricky in Hungary if your name is not matching you with your gender, with your assigned gender. You cannot choose a different name. So it's very restrictive and very transphobic. And these new legislations accepted last year. So we see a tendency that comes from the East, from Russia, from Poland, that actually endangers even more LGBTQI plus people's lives. And I really hope that we can turn the tide soon, but we have to work with the associations that do this kind of surveys, because the more information we have from the ground, from Hungarian people, the more we can actually advocate for them here in Brussels.
It's true that we have to repeat it, that even in Brussels, in Belgium, it's important that to repeat that nothing can be taken for granted.
Yeah.
That's important. So how is it in Croatia? Is it evolving better than what we hear what's happening in Hungary?
It's very different city to city. Coming from the capital city of Zagreb, of course, as you can probably assume, it was much easier to be gay. And my move to Belgium was not motivated by necessity to flee. But I have a lot of friends who are from Split, which is the second biggest city in Croatia, very popular touristic spot, and they absolutely cannot be free whatsoever in their town. There are no openly gay bars or gay clubs, no organizations, and it's a city of more than 500,000 people if you take into consideration the agglomeration of it. And what the saddest part is, actually, if you're a tourist, probably nobody's going to do anything to you. If you go there in July, August for a festival, or you go to the beach, they're not going to touch you because you're bringing in money. But for local people who if you're a man from Split and if you're gay, it's such a shame in the community. There's such a stigma around it that it's really confusing, this non-acceptance of gayness among local people. But then if you're gay and if you're a tourist, you're here for the money, so it's fine. It really depends city to city in Croatia, as I've said. For me, I haven't had horrible experiences, but I know more than a few people who've had it, especially transgender people.
Okay. And then I expected France in a better position, a bit more like Belgium, but then I thought, a couple of years ago there was a whole debate about le mariage pour tous, wedding for everything. So Vincent, how do you feel about this evolution?
Well, I think that in France things are moving, but a bit slowly, and as you say, it was in 2013 that we had a debate about opening marriage to same-sex couples, and it triggered a lot of homophobia. In France, we have an association which is called SOS Homophobie that is monitoring, receiving the complaints and producing a report every year about the evolution of transphobia and gay phobia and lesbiphobia. And they say that, of course, in 2013, there was such a peak of people calling and reporting different situation of harassment or because of a debate that was very, very much heated. Then it decreased, and in the last years it has been increasing again. Right now we have a new law in parliament to open medical procreation to lesbian couples. That is again triggering a lot of opposition, and when this happens, we also see an increase of homophobic and transphobic reactions. So it's changing, but rather slowly. And we see here in the Rainbow Index, France is at 56%, which means that there's still a lot that could be done. I'm thinking also about intersex people in the same law, which is a bioethics law that I was mentioning that is under discussion now. We had proposition to prevent surgical intervention on intersex people before they can consent. to these operations if they want to have them, like later in life, not as infants. And this proposal was rejected by the parliaments and by the parliament and the government. So it shows that, yeah, we are moving on further on some topics, but there are step backs on others. Also on the legal recognition of children from surrogate mothers that had been improved through some legal decision that is now kind of prohibited by law. So we see that it's moving, but not always in the right direction, even in France.
Yeah, so it's important to continue the lobbying and make sure that we push our politicians to vote to protect our and enhance and make larger our LGBTQI plus rights.
Yeah, I think there is a tendency, especially maybe in some of the members of the community, because rights have for sure evolved, to think that the situation now is okay and what do we have to ask for more, but I think that, well, there are still members of our community that face a lot of discrimination, harassment, that are not protected under law, and that is our common duty as being part of this huge community to support them, to learn about these different categories. I was talking about, intersex people. I think very little people in our community know about intersex people and their struggle. So it's an encouragement, I think, for everybody to get to know all these categories that are under this rainbow umbrella and to understand how we are connected to these people and our fights or their fights, and that we need to fight all of these battles together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think these statistics and these surveys are really good to see where we are. But then we also have to look very from a local point of view, for example, for Brussels. Because indeed, as we already mentioned, we all experienced, even in Brussels, which is a very open city, some kind of retortion, some kind of harassment. And we have to mention that it can be not only physical abuse, but it very often it is actually verbal abuse. So we have to make sure that every time when we experience something, that we don't second guess ourselves that, oh, is it really homophobic, or oh, is it really transphobic? No, we have to actually realize that indeed, if we have this feeling, it probably means that it is a kind of a form of an abuse. So we have to contact these organizations to tell them, because they will build on this knowledge and they can actually create laws and regulations that we might not think right now that are actually important. So it could be in schools against bullying. We have certain type of laws, I guess, in Belgium to counteract bullying. But the more knowledge we have, the more detailed we can go and react indeed. So I think it's super important.
Yeah, there's the knowledge, of course. There's all those studies and those figures and percentages. But what is your personal feeling, personal perception of life in Brussels? That's also important. How do you feel here?
Well, I feel quite safe, to be honest. Although was I harassed, and did I hear bad comments, and did I hear pedal shouted, which means faggot, shouted towards me in the street just last weekend? Yes, which somebody might think but doesn't that make you feel uncomfortable? In general, I feel safe. Comparing it to Zagreb, comparing it to Croatia, seeing bars that have gay flags outside in front, not just in May, June, but 12 months in a year, and showing that this is a free open space for queer people to gather and to hang out, and that you're safe here, is already a revolution for me. Although I would like to see it a bit more safe and a bit more inclusive, if I can say it in that way.
Yeah, I would say that I think we are very much used to know where we can be completely ourselves, which is the case in the street, in the gay bars. I mean, we go there, we know we are safe, but we know also that in some part of the cities we have to be more careful, and it's not something we are always conscious about it. but we know.
Simply.
A few years ago, some people around this table, we had our first drag race, which was a little bit close to the canal. And we decided, so we were all in drag, full drag, and we decided to go downtown to the gay bars and have fun after our little party.
How many were you?
We were about 15, 20.
15 drag queens.
Yeah. But we knew and we had decided before that, we had to walk together to the center, make sure that everybody was in the group, because we were afraid that if one of us would be alone, he might be harassed, he might be attacked. And I remember...
we were.
Yeah, we were. So I remember we were walking in the streets. It was night. It was like 11. Some people were laughing, but other people were looking at us in a threatening way. And we had some comments. We were in a group, so we felt safe. But it made us also realize, that discrimination is here, that harassment is very close. And we know that we have to protect ourselves in this kind of situation.
Yeah. And I just would like to add that I think generally Brussels is a good place to be the member of the queer community. And when I think of a comparison, which I shouldn't really compare Hungary to Belgium, but naturally I do.
Of course.
When I go back, last summer I went back to Budapest and I was not at ease at all. This was the first time since I moved out of Hungary that I wasn't at ease. And it was prompted because just days before I arrived, there was some incident where a girl who was walking with a simple bag, which was a rainbow-colored bag, was attacked. And she was not even a lesbian or queer, or she was just carrying a bag with rainbow colors, and she was physically attacked in Budapest. So it showed and made me realize that I am quite lucky to be able to live in a city and like Brussels, which in general indeed is quite safe, I would say. But I completely agree with Vincent that there are some places where we cannot be completely ourselves, but that is why we have to work with together within the community to make ourselves very visible and not to back down.
So that's a nice conclusion to say we are lucky actually to be in Brussels, but the fight is still going on, and we can use this here in Brussels, and the European institutions put pressure on them to force the other countries like Hungary or Poland or other ones where the LGBTQI community is really under pressure to make things change, but in a positive way, not like now. Okay, so
absolutely.
Thank you for this conversation about this. Bogat, I'm curious, what are your new recommendations today?
Yes, today I brought something slightly different than the previous times, because I brought you poetry. My first recommendation is a book called Daylight from Roya Marsh. Roya Marsh is a New York native, a poet, performer, educator, and an activist, who is actually very well recognized for her work as a spoken words artist, a slam poetry artist. So it's a very dynamic form of poetry, very, very cool, very new. And her work centers around basically giving voice to the oppressed, because her book Daylight, which was published in March 2020, touches upon butchness, queerness, blackness, lived trauma, and newly found joy in her life. So it's a very well-rounded work of poems and poetry. And basically it tells a story how to be butch, black, and woman in nowadays today's America. And you can have it also as an audiobook, so you can actually experience the author telling these wonderful poems directly with an audio form. So I think it's a fun thing to do. I mean, it can be a bit heavy, because it's not only joy, but I really recommend to try something different. And my second recommendation is Vincent mentioned a lot today intersex people. So it's a good way, because I also brought something from an intersex writer and poet. His name is Aaron Epps, and his book called Dear Herculean, which is telling the story of an experience of being in an intersex body. So basically, his work is a series of letters to a so-called Herculean Barbin. Herculean Barbin was living in the 19th century in France, and she was an intersex person. And her story is quite tragic because she was brought up as a girl. Her gender was assigned to her at birth as a girl. And then later on in her life, she had to go through forced medical examination and even a court order that declared her as a man, even though she regarded herself still a young and very bright woman. And unfortunately, due to this coerced medical examination, she committed suicide. So Aaron Epps' work is basically a series of letters to her, and together with these two identities, these two intersex experiences, he forms a very nice book of proses. It's also quite a tough read, I have to say. It's not easy to digest, but it has a very dynamic form, and it's basically really centers around the ungendered body. That for us it's very difficult to understand, because we live in a gendered body. We have like male and female and so on. But for intersex people, the situation is much more complicated. And Aaron Epps' works describes this experience. So
And what's the name of the book?
The book is Dear Herculean.
Okay, thank you, Bogat. And now the time has come to talk about music. Vjeran, we are all ears now.
Well, we're going local today. We're recommending two local Belgian artists. First and foremost, our angelic, soft-spoken, unofficial queen of Belgian radio, Angèle. She celebrated just a few weeks ago, like many of us, Valentine's Day, and to celebrate Valentine's Day and all sorts of different loves, but especially queer love. She covered Edith Piaf's La Vie en Rose in a music video that highlights LGBTQ plus love in a lot of series on Netflix, like Sense8, Black Mirror, Sex Education, Orange is the New Black, Grace and Frankie, and so on and so on. And yeah, they're all represented in this very brief video that you can catch on YouTube, and you can hear Angèle sing La Vie en Rose. Everybody say love.
Love!
Now let the music play. So, another recommendation is Maxime Lani, who is again a Belgian electronic DJ and producer from Ghent. In pop music or in the electronic music, it's very rare, and there are only few people that break through at a very young age. Maxime is not one of them. He broke through at the age of 37 2 years ago in 2019. And I'm going to share just a small little thing, what he said speaking with the HLN. He said that I started in 2003, followed by a long and bumpy course. I helped put the Ghent scene on the map, organized events, played sets in Seoul and China, but I have always stayed under the international radar. At some point, everything can come together. And for me, that's what happened with Renaissance. I have reinvented, Renaissance is his song. He says, I have reinvented myself and developed a new sound. When the song came out, it was a turning point in my career. So after a few months, Renaissance had over 1 million hits on Spotify. And Maxime rapidly began to make a name for himself here and worldwide. Then the pandemic hit, and now, he has a much larger following, but we cannot wait to see him outside after the pandemic. And I can share that I'm very lucky, and I feel very lucky to have seen him live in one of the last events before a major lockdown. In February in 2020, there was this amazing event called Hangar, which is a great event that gathers electronic musicians and organized in several places around Brussels. And at Hangar, that was organized this time in old factory of Citroën. I saw Maxime Lani live, Maxime Lani, and it was really, 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 really incredible. So I highly recommend to see him live as soon as you can.
I didn't know he was from Ghent.
Yeah, Gentish guy.
Yeah, well, I'm a Ghentish guy too, so I'm like sensitive to this. Thank you, Vjeran. You know what? We just arrived at the end of this new episode. Is it me or it went fast?
It went fast.
Yeah.
So quickly.
So again, a big thank you to Visit Brussels to support our magazine and podcast, and of course to Vincent, to Vjeran, to Bogat. It was super interesting again, and it was fun. No?
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you, Philippe, for hosting us again.
Thank you. And I hope you too are listening to us, that you also had a good time. And you can, of course, go to our website, ket.brussels, to discover the latest news and follow our Instagram or Facebook, Spotify, YouTube accounts to stay tuned. And you can find all these links on our website. So, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Now let the music play.
Hey.